11.6 The Russian Empire. In the 1500s, Russia formed a powerful state and began to expand its territory. Over the next few centuries, it built a great empire that stretched across Eurasia. Unlike China or Japan, however, Russia made efforts to modernize by adopting Western ideas. The rise of Russia. The origins of the Russian state go back to the late 1400s and the rise of Prince Ivan III of Moscow. At the time, the Mongols still controlled Russia, but they were divided and their power was waning. They allowed Russian princes to govern their own cities in return for tribute payments. They also allowed Russians to practice their Orthodox Christian faith, which helped bolster Russian identity under Mongol rule. Ivan III, also known as Ivan the Great, came to power in 1462. Seeing that the Mongols were in decline, he began to conquer lands around Moscow and build up his strength. By 1480, he had thrown off Mongol control. He continued his conquests over the next 2 decades, tripling the size of Moscow's territory and making it the dominant power in Russia. He began to call himself Tsar, the Russian form of Caesar. He saw Russia as the Third Rome, the heir to the Roman and Byzantine empires, and their defender of Christianity. Ivan the Great's successors continued to expand the Russian state. The most powerful of the early czars was his grandson, Ivan IV, who gained the throne as a child in 1533. During his reign of nearly 50 years, Ivan IV took 3 steps to strengthen the central government and modernize Russia. First, he conquered Mongol lands to the south and east, incorporating them into Russian territory. Second, he instituted reforms, including a uniform code of laws, to make the state more efficient. Third, he fought feudalism and took steps to curb the power of the boyars, Russia's landed nobility. Ivan is best remembered, however, as a cruel tyrant who terrorized Russian society. Midway through his reign, he became obsessed with threats to his rule. He persecuted the boyars by attacking them and seizing their lands. He created a secret police force and had thousands of people arrested, tortured, and killed. These actions earned him the nickname Ivan the Terrible. Rule of the Romanovs. After Ivan's death in 1584, his son Fyodor became Tsar. Fyodor was a weak ruler, however, who failed to mend the divisions caused by his father. In the early 1600s, after Fyodor's death, Russia was engulfed in a 15-year period of civil war known as the Time of Troubles. In 1613, however, a new Tsar, Michael Romanov, came to power. Gradually, Russia began to recover from the social divisions Ivan had created. The Romanov family would rule Russia for the next 300 years. Under the Romanovs, Russia continued to expand its empire. It moved east, taking in the lands of Siberia, a huge portion of the Asian continent, and extending Russia's borders to the Pacific Ocean. Siberia was rich in resources, including furs. During the 1600s, Russian colonizers settled in Siberia and established a lucrative fur trade. The modernizing czars. The Romanovs continued to reform and modernize the Russian state. The leaders in this effort were Peter I, also known as Peter the Great, and Catherine the Great, who mark the golden age of Russia's Enlightenment. When Peter took power in 1682, Russia was still largely isolated from Europe. But Peter was determined to open Russia up to the west. He took a long journey through England and France to absorb new ideas. He visited factories, hospitals, and museums, and even worked for a time in a shipyard. He returned home with plans to transform Russia into a modern nation. Peter sought to gain access to a coastline on the Baltic Sea, which he successfully acquired via war with Sweden. The territory gained from Sweden would become, quote, Russia's window into the West. There he built a modern new capital named after himself, St. Petersburg, based on European designs. He brought in European advisors and specialists, set up schools to teach technical subjects, and established an Academy of Sciences to promote new learning. Under his rule, Russia built factories and roads and established a professional army and civil service on the European model. The government required officials to dress in the Western style and to shave off their beards. Russia's modernizing efforts continued under another emperor, Catherine II, who ruled from 1762 to 1796. She was also known as Catherine the Great. Like Peter the Great, Catherine also founded schools and supported the arts and sciences. She promoted Enlightenment principles of justice and good government. But like her predecessors, she was an absolute ruler who governed with an iron fist, allowing few freedoms and forcing Jews into a limited area called the Pale of Settlement. The end of monarchy. By the time of Catherine's reign, Russia faced a looming crisis that would eventually bring down the czars. For more than a century, Russia's serf population had been growing. In 1800, around half of all Russian peasants, around 20 million people, were tied to the soil like peasants in Western Europe had been prior to the 14th century. They had no rights and lived in terrible poverty. When they revolted, as they sometimes did, their uprisings were brutally repressed. Thus, while Russia was taking steps to modernize, its social system was still mired in the past. Russia was the last European country to outlaw serfdom in 1861, and by then it was too late. In 1917, a revolution erupted and brought an end to the Russian monarchy as a result. The Romanov attempt to modernize Russia had been too concentrated on science and technological developments and ignored socio-political developments. This unbalance brought about the last of the European revolutions.